yeah, I should do shout outs. I forgot. This is a grand finals. This is my first grand finals. Shout out to Joseph Singson. We all miss him. Fly High. Uh, he's my coach for debate. He's the one that got me into this. Shout out to Charan Homer. I haven't seen him debate in a while, but he's one of my biggest inspirations in debate. Never gotten this far. Yeah. Okay. Cool. 3, 2, 1. The world is in disarray. Politics is confusing, and things are uncertain, and the US is not as easygoing as it is with Trump in power. Right now, what we need is stability and certainty. Having a hard stance against one of the biggest countries that are not aligned with one of the biggest countries in the world is going to lead to a myriad of problems coming from everyone at the point in which the EU decides to be a lot more selfish in their ultimate goal of making Russia seem as the aggressor. Number one, economic instability and signaling trade wars from one side or another is just more likely to happen. Social instability as we continue to polarize sides within the communities. And as Joseph clarified, these communities inside EU are not one monogamy. To blame the US or not will lead to more instability and infighting and military instability as escalation happens when these countries have a hard stance, as a lot of their military is dependent on the US being in NATO. And these are what the Prime Minister said are the reasons why we need a stance. Economic, social, military things are going to be affected by the Russia and Ukraine war, and it's super proximate to them. Well, them going against US, I flip it and tell you that having a hard stance will actually will actually risk them on all these three factors in even worse scenarios and situations if they actually continue it. Panel, I want to be very clear about this. In as much as government gives you massive impacts about how the EU will be put in further economic development, this comes at the expense of the fucking up major diplomatic relations that are found within the world. In as much as this debate is about catering to the EU and their interests, it's also a debate about how the entire world is likely to act in accordance with the EU, suddenly becoming as aggressive towards one of the biggest military superpowers in the world. The current context right now is not the most ideal. We agree, but it is the one that guarantees some form of relative safety and security. It is quite unfortunate that government bents seem to just dismiss a lot of the valid claims that both my partners have given. There is always an opportunity cost to the policy being made on both sides. What we have consistently said is that opportunity cost to policy, we said is that there comes at the expense of both Ukrainians in Ukraine and the average European person in the EU. This debate is more than just responding to the Russian aggression. This debate is also about keeping the world peace by making mommy EU and daddy US together. I also would like to call out that government needs to pick a side. It's the EU so weak that if Russia wins this fight with Ukraine, all the other countries will easily join Russia and fight against them in trade or military, or are they so strong that they can survive all these economic tariffs against the US, these backups like US military to support these EU countries. They need to pick a stance on how strong EU is against the US and how strong EU is against Russia. And you can't say both sides are not going to be true. So, panel, note that a lot of what government says is quite assertive and at best proves a sense of capacity. They accuse us of not having positive material, but also fail to respond to the shadows of doubt or recast in terms of what might happen. As Newton once said, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The scary part here is we do not know how Trump and the rest of the world will react. If we learn jack shit coming from the past 3 years, is that inflation sucks ass, war is bad, and there is a lot of uncertainty and volatility. Gang, for Gov's case to work, you need to buy in from the EU as a whole and the individual countries. But in the info slide, 5 countries abstain and doesn't give a fuck about this. It's completely valid to wait and see, because as we told you, things do not always get better. Things can escalate for the worse. Let's win the economic trade because government pushes that on us and tries to assert economic upside for the EU. When the Nord Stream pipeline got bombed amidst the war, this led to a supply chain crisis and inflation for natural gas and other commodities. Economics 101. supply and demand. Putting fuel to the fire and going into potentially World War III is inflationary and bad for the world. As what Seth said in his POI, take a look at the prices right now of any commodity, and we've been mid, and that is good. On their side, take a stance either pro or anti can trigger Russia to justify in the European states when in doubt, don't. All this supply chain crisis shebang literally happens when you take sharp stances, since this justifies relations and infighting within the EU and particular communities. This impact is something that exists exclusively on government bench. So, what was the first exchange and how did Joseph exactly win? He told us the info-sided Trump stance of the US is strategic ambiguity for protectionism. He is not taking a firm stance to piss people off. That is to say that the EU and those affected to follow suit and should also go with strategic and ambiguity, with uncertainty and ahead in terms of Trump's craziness, and that he's willing to take a lot of risk against people. We don't want any chaos or infighting, and this is the best possible thing. And that's what we want to prevent. And then opposite government's response to us is they're telling us, oh, it's just a negative case, and they completely dismiss that claim that Seth said. We are telling you EU needs to be strategic and needs to avoid wars. And the positive material we are trying to say is to have good ties with the US and literally trying to stop and prevent and dampen down all the effects of this war. And they're telling us that, and then, now, they're also telling us that, oh, guys, it's not possible for USA to put any tariffs to the EU. If you actually listen to their analysis on how EU will survive these tariffs from the US, you can only hear one line of analysis. Oh, it's because they have other allies. This isn't enough. Maybe in Biden administration, this would be true. They are close allies. They have lots of investments in these countries. They probably have lots of other allies to survive. They're one of the biggest supporters of the US. But wait, that sounds familiar. Canada and fucking Mexico. These are countries that have all those true, but at the same time, US still is willing to give them tariffs because they did not align initially to their interests. And then the moment these countries like Mexico and Canada started aligning and sucking up to that US, that is when Trump is allowing them and actually lowering those tariffs and stopping them. So Trump is willing to take hard stances on people that are close to them, and this breaks their only line of analysis telling us on how EU will survive. No, EU is actually heavily dependent on the US, and there's a lot of connections that they have, and you can't just assert to us telling that, oh, they're gonna be perfectly fine, because I'm sure they can survive, but they would not be economically happy. So if you want to prevent any trade wars, prevent any kind of more escalations in our side, then side with opposition. Thank you.